The stallion didn't run first. He walked. It was early morning, and the herd stood still along the western edge of the basin, a wide plain of short grass and chalky earth, cold with dew and faint morning mist. 31 mustangs spread loosely, heads low and ears swiveling with each sound. The wind moved softly through their tails and manes, carrying dust from distant ridges. The stallion had led them for 4 years. He wasn't the largest or the oldest, but he had the scars of the strongest, faint lines along his flank, a bite mark near the base of his neck, a ridge of healed bone along the front right leg. He was slate gray, darker in the shoulders, with a deep chest and short, cautious steps. Every decision in his body had weight. That morning he looked east. No threat waited there. No predators, no rival stallions, no helicopters or fences, just open land, a shallow dip that led into what locals called the Long Flat. 30 miles of dry plain broken only by old railroad cuts and one scattered windbreak of trees. He stepped away from the herd, not a charge, not a panic. Just 5 slow steps forward, nose low to the ground. Behind him, a few yearlings twitched, unsure whether to follow. One mare lifted her head and whinnied softly, a breathy call without command. The stallion kept walking. Another 20 feet. Then he broke into a trot. Slow at first, as if testing the earth. Then faster. By the time he passed the first slight ridge, his legs had stretched into a full gallop. His head leveled, his breath thick and low, and the sound of his hooves began to rise in the air. The herd didn't follow. Not yet. They watched, still, rooted, as the stallion vanished over the rise, kicking dust behind him. The oldest mare took 2 paces forward, but stopped. A foal pressed against its mother. The air grew very quiet. Not windless, but still. The sound of hooves lingered long after he was gone. Longer than it should have. There was no canyon, no natural echo chamber, no stone to bounce from. But the sound, the rapid 4-beat rhythm of a gallop, seemed to stretch over the land, carried not by acoustics, but by something else, as if the plain refused to let it fade. It was not loud, it was not sharp, but it was there. Minutes after the stallion had vanished, a fading pulse that touched the legs of those left behind. And then it stopped, all at once, like a line cut mid-transmission. The herd stood still. No one followed, and somewhere far beyond view, the stallion ran alone for the first time. By the second day, the stallion had covered nearly 20 miles. He didn't follow the natural game trails. His movement was aimless but unhurried, sometimes walking, sometimes galloping short bursts, occasionally stopping for hours in stillness, like a sentinel without orders. No other horses came into view. No coyotes, no deer. Not even birds flew low. He crossed a shallow, dry creek near midday. Its banks were cracked but soft in the center, where moisture still lingered from a long-past storm. The stallion lowered his head to sniff at the mud, then began to paw, not with hunger, but habit. A hoof broke the surface, a cool trace of damp soil, and he turned away without drinking. A flock of crows passed overhead. They didn't call. Normally, crows in this part of the basin circled anything moving on the plain, calling in low barks, searching for predator tracks, carrion, or disruption. This time, they flew in silence. Their wings beat steadily. They didn't turn. As the stallion stepped up from the creek bed, a jackrabbit bolted from behind a bush only 10 feet away. It ran, but not in its usual zigzag. It fled in a perfectly straight line, eyes wide without a glance back. The stallion didn't give chase. He stood watching it disappear over the rise. His body was dust-coated now, the sheen of his flank dulled by sweat and grit. Muscles twitched along his shoulders, not from exertion, but from a constant tension, as if something unseen paced nearby. In the distance, a group of pronghorn antelope came into view, 6 of them, grazing near the old fence line of an abandoned cattle property. The stallion turned slightly, alert but not aggressive. The antelope lifted their heads. Their ears turned forward. One of them took a hesitant step toward him, then froze. Another flicked its tail once. Then all six moved at once, not in panic, but in intentional withdrawal, eyes on him the entire time as they backed away into the heat haze. He was alone again, not just unaccompanied, avoided. At dusk, the stallion stopped near a half-dead juniper tree. He circled once, slowly, then stood still beside it, facing north. He did not graze. He did not lie down. He simply stood. The wind blew west. His mane lifted slightly, and in the air there was a faint tremble. Not sound, not scent. A kind of absence, like something had passed and pulled all other things away with it. By the third day, the stallion moved slower, not from fatigue. His legs still carried him easily, his lungs steady, but the land beneath him no longer felt like the land he knew. The textures had changed. The ground wasn't soft or dry or packed. It was off, like walking across something that wasn't meant to be walked on. The dust was too fine in places, as though it had been sifted. Rocks, normally random, formed patterns without symmetry, curved lines, partial spirals, trails that led nowhere. Grass grew, then stopped, abruptly, in odd square patches like cutouts in an otherwise wild field. Where he walked, the grass did not grow back. That was the first sign. He doubled back once near a dry wash, a place he had passed the night before. His own hoofprints were visible in the earth, deep and directional, but the surrounding grass, which should have stood again, lay pressed flat, not trampled, suppressed, and the silence deepened. Not just fewer sounds. No sound. Even the air moving through distant brush had stopped whispering. He lifted his head often, ears turning, but there was nothing to listen to. Then came the wolves. Late afternoon. Distant movement. 3 of them, all healthy, crossing the plain at a distance. They noticed him quickly. Wolves here weren't strangers to wild horses. They tested foals when they could, but respected healthy adults. Usually they would circle, curious, calculating risk. Not this time. They stopped. One sniffed the air. The lead wolf lowered its head. Not in hunting posture, but something closer to recognition or rejection. After just a moment, they turned as one and ran. Not fast, not fearful, just fast enough to leave. The stallion watched them go. He didn't flinch, didn't shift, but he did exhale, slowly, nostrils wide, as if trying to push something out of his lungs. That night, the stars didn't come. The sky was clear, not a cloud above, but no light appeared, just a dome of pale gray-black with no depth. The moon, near full the night before, had failed to rise. The stallion stood alone in the middle of the plain, where the grass had stopped growing, the animals had stopped following, and the ground beneath him held his steps like memory pressed into earth. He turned in a slow circle. And then, for the first time since leaving the herd, he whinnied. Once. The echo came back too fast, as if the sound had never left. The ridge wasn't tall, a gradual rise of stone and dust in the middle of the plain. Unremarkable on most days, the kind of place animals crossed without notice. In spring, it bloomed faintly, with yellow wildflowers. In winter, it cracked and crumbled under frost. But on this morning, as the stallion approached, the ridge looked wrong. He climbed slowly, hooves steady, nostrils wide. No breeze touched his mane. No birds circled above. A single line of ants moved along a rock edge, then turned back as he stepped forward. Halfway up, the light changed. The sun still shone. It was high and pale in the sky. No clouds masked it, and yet the stallion's shadow faded. Not disappeared all at once, but thinned, like fog, burned by heat. First, his tail lost its trace. Then, the outline of his legs grew unclear. By the time he reached the top, his entire body cast no shadow at all. The stone beneath him was dry. The sun above was real. But the earth did not respond to his presence. He pawed once at the ridge's edge. The rock shifted, dust scattered, but no track remained. Even where his hoof had scraped, the stone looked untouched, as if weight did not apply here. From above, he could see the plain stretch endlessly in all directions, except behind him. The land he had come from was hazy, blurred not by distance but by resistance, like heat rising off asphalt, like a thought trying not to be remembered. The stallion turned in place, his muscles tensed, but not from threat, from uncertainty, as if his senses were asking a question his mind didn't understand. A pair of ravens appeared on the horizon. They approached steadily, wings gliding, circling low over the ridge, then higher, then away. Not once did they look down. Their flight path, perfectly curved, carved a clean perimeter around the stallion, leaving him untouched by wing or glance. They wouldn't cross above him, as if even his absence of shadow cast something they feared. By midday, heat rose in waves. The stones beneath his hooves grew hot, but he didn't move. A tremor passed underfoot, not from the earth, but from within it, like a vibration that couldn't find a direction. Still, no mark showed where he stood, and when the stallion finally descended the ridge, the land behind him held no trace of his climb. No dust displaced, no pebble out of place, no hoofprints. It was as if nothing had ever stood on the ridge, except the sun, and something the ridge refused to name. The hollow wasn't on any map, not because it was hidden, the land here was flat for miles, but because no one thought it worth remembering. It lay just past the ridge, a shallow depression in the plain, lined by fractured stone and a few skeletal shrubs that had long stopped growing. The stallion entered it slowly. His hooves made contact with the dirt, but no sound followed. No crunch, no thud, not even the soft pat of flesh over earth. It was as if sound refused to form. He paused, lowered his head, breathed. Still nothing. The wind didn't move the grass. His own breath, heavy and wet, vanished as soon as it left his nostrils, swallowed by still air. His ears twitched forward, testing for birds, for insects, for even the soft vibration of the world. Silence held everything like a fist. He whinnied, a clear, strong call, loud and long. The sound left his throat, his chest, his open mouth, but it didn't go anywhere. No echo, no return, not even the faintest bounce from the rock nearby. He stomped a hoof. Dust lifted. But the strike of horn against stone? Silent, as though the ground existed, but sound could no longer remember how to live there. Then, faintly, a breath, but not his, from behind. He turned sharply, head high, ears locked backward. Nothing. Empty land. No movement, no figure, no wind. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Each motion should have made noise. Shifting dirt, creaking tendons, clipped grass. But it was like walking through a vacuum. Then came the second sound. A delayed step. One hooffall, just one. Behind him. Out of sync. He stopped, listened. Another breath. Shallow. Mimicking his own, but a second late. Like someone playing back a recording with poor timing. He turned again. Nothing there. No predator. No wind. No second animal. Only the faint sensation of being followed by the memory of himself. And still, the hollow held no echo. He moved to the center of the depression. The grass here was sparse and gray, curled in on itself. He turned once in place, muscles rigid, and then stood still. The air pressed against him. Not cold, not hot, just dense. A bird passed high overhead. He saw it, but heard nothing. Not even the flap of wings. Just motion. Like watching a silent film. The stallion exhaled, and for the first time in hours, his own breath made the smallest sound. A whisper. Thin, hollow, but not alone. A second breath followed, identical, but half a second late. He was not alone in the hollow, and whatever stood beside him now had learned his rhythm. The stallion didn't move for hours. He stood in the center of the hollow, legs still, head low, breath slow and steady. The silence held firm around him, pressing into his ears and chest like fog without weight. Even blinking seemed to carry more presence than sound, but something in his vision twitched. Not outside of him, inside it. At the edge of his field of view, just beyond the curve of his shoulder, there was motion. Subtle. Small. The kind of shift one only notices in the periphery. A flick, a bend, a disturbance of light. He didn't turn his head. He didn't need to. Because the movement didn't come from something near him. It came from where he stood. From his body. He took a breath, slow, careful. And there it was again. A ripple. Just a flicker in the outline of his own shoulder. But his shoulder hadn't moved. His weight hadn't shifted. His muscles had remained in perfect balance. And yet the world reacted as if he had taken a step. The dirt didn't stir, but the air above it shimmered. He blinked once, hard. Stillness. Then again, and the flicker repeated. Only now it was no longer just a flicker. It was a shadow. Faint. Dull. A half outline of his head, cast slightly to the left of where it should be. And it moved. Not dramatically. Just a twitch of an ear, a turn of the neck, but none of it matched what his body was doing. The stallion remained motionless. His shadow did not. Somewhere behind him, coyotes howled. Not a pack howl. Not hunger or challenge, but something different. A single note. Long, uncertain. Then silence. Then another to the left. Then one farther out to the right. None of them moved closer. They howled away from him. Not toward his presence, but in resistance to it. As if warning one another not to see, he turned his head slightly, just enough to catch the shadow in full view. And there it was, a perfect echo of his shape, but not bound to the ground. It floated just above the dirt, trailing his outline. It didn't follow his movements. It led them, milliseconds too early. Every breath, every blink, every turn was predicted, as if the world around him had begun to function in reverse. The stallion stepped forward, just once. The shadow did not follow. It stayed in place for a second longer than it should have, then snapped forward and reattached to him like a suit that had slipped out of sync. He stopped again. The movement beside him continued, not mirrored, not delayed. Now it was independent. Not a shadow, not a reflection. Something inside the hollow had begun using his shape, and whatever it was, had learned how to move without making sound. He left the hollow before sunrise. The stallion's steps were slow, deliberate, almost reluctant, as though the very space around him resisted his departure. The air clung to his coat like mist, heavy but dry, and the edge of the hollow passed beneath him without transition. No birds called, no wind shifted the grass. Even the clouds above, faint and thin like stretched linen, did not move. Behind him, the shape still followed. It no longer tried to match him. It no longer pretended to be his shadow. Now, it simply existed. Somewhere between him and the earth, a presence tethered to no law of physics or animal. When he paused, it wandered. When he turned, it didn't. It had learned freedom. The stallion moved northeast, toward the long flat, where the land fell into a wide basin and sound usually traveled for miles. There, the plains held echo. There, a whinny could be heard beyond the ridgelines, past the valleys where elk still passed and wild cattle gathered near lost water tanks. He didn't graze. He didn't drink. He walked until he reached a spot no taller than his shoulder, just a shallow rise in the earth, enough to be seen from below. He climbed to the top, turned once, and stood still. From there, he could see the earth stretching in all directions. Distant shadows of herds he no longer belonged to. Shimmering heat over dry dust. A hawk spiraled far above. Silent. And still, that thing moved beside him. Not in his shape anymore, but near him. Hovering. Waiting. The stallion lifted his head, ears forward, chest full of breath. And then he whinnied. Not a warning. Not a call for his kind. But something older. Something that belonged to the land, to the pulse of hooves on stone and bone and wind. A sound that didn't seek response, only acknowledgement. And the plain heard it. It rippled out like thunder over water. Not loud, but wide. Deeper than voice. Clearer than echo. In distant valleys, birds took flight. Herds stirred. Dogs on ranches howled in confusion. The sound curved up canyon walls and rolled over fences, through broken windmills, and across bones half buried in dust. It reached everything. And then, silence. Not quiet, not calm. Silence. The kind that empties. No more birds called. No more insects moved. Even the wind, once soft, now fell completely still. From that moment, nothing in the long flat echoed again. Not for years, not even after fires, not even after flood. They said no stallion had ever let himself to die alone, but none had ever been followed by something not alive.